Hello church, and welcome to Sunday. We miss you. I miss seeing absolutely everyone, but it won't be long. We'll be back together. How lucky we are to be here in the Nambucca Valley. Look at this. Absolutely gorgeous, and just want to say we can't wait to get back together with each other. And I know that with the leadership team, we do ask you to reach out to other people within the church, other people within the community that are struggling at the moment. It's kind of scary times, it's confusing times and scary times, and a little bit lonely. So please reach out to other people within the church. Just give them a call, just touch base, say how you going, hope everything's well, and I'm thinking of you and I'm praying for you. So don't forget to do that with each other this week. We're in for a real treat today, and I'm really excited. I'm going to hand over in a minute to the beautiful Liddy, who's going to read you a sensational verse that we literally just met a man walking across here like just 5 minutes ago, and Liddy said, "Hey, what Bible verse do you think we should actually do?" And he gave us one, and I think you're going to absolutely love it today. Love you guys. Pray you have a fantastic week, and again, don't forget to reach out to each other.
Hey church family, I'm just going to read a verse out of the Bible. It's Matthew 11:28 through to 30. I think it's definitely good for this time right now, what's going on in the community. So, come upon me, all ye that labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest in your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
I cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me.
I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bound and drenched in tears,
They laid him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone. Messiah still and all alone.
praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God.
On the third and break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. All trampled death
O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My body longs for you. In a dry and weary land where there is no water. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory, because your love is better than life. My lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands.
All these pieces, broken and scattered, in mercy gathered, leveled and whole. Empty-handed, but not forsaken. I've been set free. I've been set free. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. Oh, I can see you now. Oh, I can see the love in your eyes. Laying yourself down, raising up the broken to life. You take our failure, you take our weakness. You set your treasure in jars of pain. Take this heart, Lord, I'll be your vessel, the world to see your heart in me. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. Oh, I can see you now. Oh, I can see the love in your eyes. Laying yourself down, raising up the broken to life. I can see the love in your eyes. Raising up the broken to life.
So this is Genesis 37 up to verse 28. So Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived as a foreigner. This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to the father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. One night, Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. "Listen to this dream," he said. "We were out in the field, tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered round and bowed low before mine." His brothers responded, "So you think you will be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. "Listen, I've had another dream," he said. "The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me." This time he told the dream to his father as well as his brothers, but his father scolded him. "What kind of dream is that?" he asked. "Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you?" But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dreams meant. Soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to pasture for the father's flocks at Shechem. When they had gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, "Your brothers are pasturing the sheep at Shechem. Get ready and I'll send you to them." "I'm ready to go," Joseph replied. "Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are getting along," Jacob said. "Then come back to me with a report." So Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph travelled to Shechem from their home in the valley of Hebron. When he arrived there, a man from the area noticed him wandering around the countryside. "What are you looking for?" he asked. "I'm looking for my brothers," Joseph replied. "Do you know where they're pasturing their sheep?" "Yes," the man told him. "They have moved on from here, but I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph followed his brothers to Dothan and found them there. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said. "Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. We can tell our father a wild animal has eaten him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." But when Reuben heard of their scheme, he came to Joseph's rescue. "Let's not kill him," he said. "Why should we shed any blood? Let's just throw him in this empty cistern in the wilderness. Then he'll die without our laying a hand on him." Reuben was secretly planning to rescue Joseph and return him to his father. So when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing. Then they grabbed him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. Then, just as they were sitting down to eat, they looked up and saw a caravan of camels in the distance coming toward them. It was a group of Ishmaelite traders taking a load of gum, balm, and aromatic resin from Gilead down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain by killing our brother? We'll have to cover up the crime. Instead of hurting him, let's sell him to those Ishmaelite traders. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." And his brothers agreed. So when the Ishmaelites, who were Midianite traders, came by, Joseph's brothers pulled him out of the cistern and sold him to them for 20 pieces of silver. And the traders took him to Egypt.
Well, hi everyone, wherever you are and whenever you're watching this. Now, our life crew last term was doing a series and it was called Act Justly, Love Mercy and Walk Humbly. And this verse actually comes from the Old Testament, from Micah chapter 6 verse 8. And I'll just read the whole verse to you. It says, "Know, O people, the Lord has told you what is good, and this is what he requires of you, to do what is right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." Now, after I left Life Crew that night, I jumped in the car, turned on the radio, and that exact verse was being read out. Now, I'm pretty sure that God had that verse for me for what was about to come. You see, the last 5 months have been a real shocker for our family, especially in the last month. We've had 3 deaths in the family. We've had to navigate doing funerals with COVID restrictions. We've had some major issues on the farm. And most of all, I've been struggling with a family situation with what's just and what is fair in this situation. Now, as I struggled, God really made it clear all along, though, that I was to do what Micah 6 verse 8 was saying, and that was to do what is right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. That's especially if I'm going through storms and struggles in my life. Now, there were days when I was going through all this where I couldn't even articulate a prayer, and all I could say was, "Oh God, 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 or even God help me. And that's all I could do. Now, I know that some of you are also going through storms and shockers in your life. And when you look around other people, you wonder how possibly they could be acting so normal and talking about such normal stuff. But everyone will go through troubles and shockers in their life. I had to wonder, how do I walk humbly with God? Well, the message was that I need to be a little bit more like Jesus each day and less like me. And when I learn to do that, that way I can act justly and love mercy. Because if I don't do that, there's going to be serious consequences in my life and for those that are around me. Now, I want to take you on a journey of a particular story in the Bible, because I needed to see what was fairness or justice and what would happen if God wasn't in it. Now, when we think of justice or fairness, we think that things have to be fair. Now, I also looked up a definition from the Australian Legal Institute, and its definition says that justice is the application of the rule of the law. That makes sense, right? If someone breaks the law, we want to see justice done. But then how does our common definition of justice, meaning to be fair, work? What I think is fair may not be what you think is fair. But shouldn't we all know what is right and what is wrong? This could really open a whole can of worms, really. So let's look at the Bible story. Grab your Bibles or your iPhones or your computers so you can follow along. We're going to look at an Old Testament story that has injustice or unfairness, I guess, woven all the way through it. The story of Joseph is in Genesis 27 and onwards, and it's probably one that some of you know, and if you don't know, it's good to hear about it. It's the story of Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat, and it's actually the story of that movies are made from. He endures awful treatment by his brothers. He gets sold into slavery, and then, spoiler alert though, he turns into one of the most powerful men in Egypt, and he saves his family and the whole nation from famine. Yet it's full of drama, a dysfunctional family, and murder plots. But you see, God's plan will always happen. Now, I'm going to start with each character in the drama so that you get an idea of where they're coming from, which influences how they act in the story. Firstly, there's Jacob. He's the father in the story. He's the father of Joseph. Now, Jacob's father was Isaac, and his grandfather was Abraham. So he's actually come from a long line of God's people. But as a young man, he left a little bit to be desired, really. You see, he was his mother's favourite, and what happened was he actually cheated his brother Esau out of his father's inheritance and his blessing, all with the mother's help. So then he had to flee to another land, to his to his uncle's land, where he had to actually work for him, and his father tricked him into working for absolutely nothing. Now, Jacob at this time managed to gain not one wife, but 4 wives. He had 13 children, 12 of which were boys and 1 girl, and he never saw his parents again. Now, Jacob's wives. When Jacob travelled to his uncle's land, he met Rachel, whom he fell in love with. Now, this was his uncle's daughter, the youngest daughter. So what happened was Jacob had to work for the uncle for 7 years so he could marry Rachel. But what happened was his uncle tricked him and he ended up marrying Leah instead. So he worked another 7 years so he could marry Rachel. That's 2 wives. You can see what's happening here, can't you? Jacob's in love with Rachel and not Leah. Leah began having sons, and Rachel couldn't. So Rachel gave Jacob her servant to have sons for her. That's wife number 3. Then Leah stopped having sons, so she gave her servant to Jacob to have sons for her. That's wife number 4. What a mess. Now the brothers. There were 12 brothers in total, all from the different wives. So you can imagine the jostling going on to be in favour with Jacob, their father. All of them worked in the fields and the paddocks, especially looking after the cattle and the sheep. All that is really except for Rachel's 2 sons. Remember, Jacob loved Rachel the most. Rachel ended up dying in childbirth with the youngest son, Benjamin. And finally, our main character is Joseph. Joseph is Rachel's other son. He eventually grows into, though, one of the most amazing men in the Bible, which is further on in the chapters of Genesis. Joseph is his father's favourite son, mainly because he's the son of Rachel, who he loves. Now, when we get first introduced to Joseph, he's around about 17 years old at this stage. And Jacob's not hiding the fact that Joseph is his favourite. Of course, this is where it all starts going wrong. So let's open up then to Genesis chapter 37, and we're going to look at verses 1 to 28 that Paul read to us before. Verse 2 says, "This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing." Okay, let's stop right there. What's the first thing we hear about Joseph? He's dobbing on his brothers to his father. Now, I know all kids do this, but Joseph's a man at this stage. Continuing on. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. Okay, now I'm pretty sure Jacob would fail parenting 101. Out of 12 boys and 1 girl, Jacob picks one favourite and everyone gets to know about it. What a setup this is for happy families. So one day, Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. Jacob did what? He now gets a special gift for Joseph. What a spoilt favourite Joseph is. He gets a special gift. Think Chanel quality in this coat. Now, people don't really know what this coat was like, except that it was multicoloured and had really long sleeves. And this coat is saying, this guy's not working out in the fields anymore. He's a little bit above that. Now, no one goes out into the fields right with a Chanel coat on and Pierre Cardin shoes. So Jacob has now obviously elevated Joseph above all the other brothers. But don't forget, Joseph's he's the second youngest in this family. And out in the fields, all of Joseph's brothers are wearing their King G clothes and their boots. Now that's saying it all. So stop again here. You decide, is this a fair situation going on in this family? But hey, there's nothing really wrong going on, right? What was that first verse again that I said from Micah 6 verse 8? It was, do what is right, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. So no surprises then in verse 4. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. So no surprises, Joseph's brothers start to hate him because of what Jacob's doing, elevating him above them. But I know hate is really a strong word here, and it's starting to take hold in their hearts. So just take note of that, though, for further on in this story. You have to feel a little sorry for them, though, don't you? You can just see what's going on in their mind. Like, why does Dad love him more than us? Like, we can't help not being Rachel's sons. We work really hard in the fields looking after the flocks. And hey, there's no way I'm going to say good morning to that little... Now comes the interesting part in the story of Joseph. It shows a bit of his lack of wisdom at this stage. Look down at verse 5 and onwards. Just imagine the scene. They're all out at lunch talking about the paddocks and what's happening and what lambs have been born that morning and hey, we really need a bit more rain. And then Joseph comes swanning up in his Chanel coat and says, guess what, guys? I've had a dream. He then tells them about the dream, and then he says to them, and in it, you're all bowing down to me. Isn't that awesome? Now, he's got to be reading their body language here, doesn't he? The brothers are so happy not. Now, even if these dreams are coming from God, which incidentally they are, Joseph isn't giving God any thoughts here. He isn't checking with God, what does he want him to do with this? So what was that verse again? Do what is right, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. Now Joseph has a second dream. And yep, he tells them all this dream to even his father. Look at verse 9 onwards. You can imagine this scene too, right? Say they're all at dinner and they're going, "Here, can you pass the potatoes, please?" And then Joseph blurts out, "Guess what, guys? I've had another dream. And guess what? In this dream, 11 stars are bowing down to me." What have I got 11 of? That's right, brothers. And the sun and moon bow down to me too. I wonder who that could be. Is Joseph just plain annoying? How is this fair? Already he's the favourite one, and now he's saying to his brothers and his fathers, "Hey, you're all going to bow down to me." Can't you just feel your own blood pressure rising over this? What was that verse again? Do what is right, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. Now, how the brothers deal with this situation, that's what's important. Any seemed unfairness to us can end up costing us dearly, more in the way we act and react. And sadly, this perceived unfairness by the brothers has festered inside them, causing them to take radical action. They are way past asking asking God what to do, and in fact, God's not even mentioned in this chapter. Not by Jacob, not by the brothers, and not by Joseph. Let's jump down to verses 18 and onwards. Joseph is sent out to his brothers to check up on them and give a report back to Dad. Great, he's not even working out in the field with the cattle and the sheep and everything. He's at home lounging around in his Chanel coat, sipping his little soy lattes. You can imagine him going out into the field trying to walk out there with all this great clothes on. Now the brothers see him coming from a distance, and immediately their chest is tightening and their blood pressure is rising. How dare he come out here to check up on us with that ridiculous Chanel coat? Verse 18. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognised him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. How did this situation jump from contemplating murder about their brother? Now we read this quite easily, but just think, this is murder of your brother. They are wanting their justice of this spoilt brat, but really murder. Just imagine the scene. Joseph is wandering up to the field to his brothers in his Chanel coat. "Hi guys, I've just come out here to check up on you and report back to Dad." The brothers now see red, and this ridiculous Chanel coat that signifies all that favouritism is torn off Jacob and ripped to shreds. Grown men, all fighting Joseph. They eventually throw him into the well. Now, is this fair? Is this the justice that the brothers were looking for? Long story short, Joseph isn't killed, but he does get sold to traders who make him a slave in Egypt. The brothers think Joseph is out of their lives forever. Justice has been done, but has it? What was that verse again? Do what is right, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. Now, I'd like to go on with the story of Joseph, but it really is a long one. Joseph experiences more injustices when he's in Egypt, but this time, you see, he walks with God. Years later, Joseph actually sees his brothers again, but he's second in command of Egypt now, and the brothers don't recognise him. And in chapter 45, Joseph says this to his brothers. "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. But don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. So it was God who sent me here, not you." You see, God had the bigger picture. Now, we watch a show on the ABC and it's called Anne's Brush with Fame. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not. Now, very talented Anne Doe actually interviews famous people while painting their portrait. Now, there is an episode this season where Anne interviews the Honourable Michael Kirby, who was a Justice of the High Court in Australia. He is known for standing up for justice, and he gives a case of a story where his heart was in conflict with the law that he upheld. A refugee family was from Afghanistan, and they fled Afghanistan because they were a minority religion there, and they ended up in Australia with great difficulty. With them were their 2 young sons. Now, what happened was the Family Court of Australia petitioned for the 2 children to come out of detention so they could attend school, and they were looked after by the community in in Adelaide, I think it was. Now, what happened was the immigration minister at that time actually went to the High Court to see if the family court had jurisdiction over children in detention. The Act was then examined to see how children in detention were to be treated. And Michael Kirby had to follow the law of Australia at that time. What happened was the children were returned to the family in detention, and the family actually gave up the struggle to fight to stay in Australia. So they were sent back to Pakistan and then crossed the Khyber Pass to go into Afghanistan, and they were never heard from again. And Michael Kirby describes how hard this decision was for him. But he said he had to uphold the law of the land. Now you see, God's laws are far more perfect and just than any man-made laws. God's justice dictates that sin must be punished. We should be punished for ignoring God, for not showing mercy to others, for being selfish, and the list goes on. But the greatest unfair act was against Jesus. He was betrayed. He was arrested and killed. Unfair as he had not sinned. And Jesus finally gave his life to save ours from the punishment that we deserve. Now, Jesus loved those who were cruel to him, forgave those that treated him unfairly, and he loves us now. How can any unfairness we perceive to be against us compare to that? How can our injustices look in this light? What can we learn, though, that as we look through the lens of Jesus? Remember Micah 6, verse 8? Know, O people, the Lord has told you what is good, and this is what he requires of you: to do what is right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Now, what did I see in my family situation? If I held on to what I thought was right and just and fair without checking in with God, where would it lead? How can I know what is right or wrong unless I walk with God and read his word? How can I show mercy, which is loving kindness, unless I become more like Jesus by learning more about what he wants and being filled with the Holy Spirit? How can I walk humbly with God's heart unless I rely on God and seek what his way is? The only way is to become more like Jesus and a little bit less like me. That's what being transformed by God is all about. Romans 12, 1-2 says this: "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behaviour and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." Now, if you're not sure on all of this for yourself today, listen to these next few verses and act on them. John 3, 16-17 says this: "For this is how God loved the world. He gave his one and his only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. God sent his Son into the world not to judge the world, but to save the world through him." And Romans 10, verse 9 says this: "If you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." If any one of the people in the Genesis story had checked in with God, how differently would this story have been? If any one of them had wanted to have God's heart and act with loving kindness to the others, what a different family it would have been. Now, that's what I'm doing. I am actually praying that my story is just that, a different one if I follow Micah 6, verse 8. The Lord has told you what is good, and this is what he requires of you, Cheryl: to do what is right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And I'm praying that your story will be a different one as well. Now, there's a song by Zach Williams, which is actually called "Less Like Me." And unfortunately, our band can't play it today because of the COVID restrictions, but the link to this song is going to be in the comments section so you can check it out later. And I want to use these lyrics today as our final prayer together. So feel free to close your eyes as you listen to these words. Oh, I have days I lose the fight. I try my best, but just don't get it right. Where I talk a talk that I don't walk and miss the moments right before my eyes. Somebody with a hurt that I could have helped, somebody with a hand that I could have held. When I just can't see past myself, Lord, help me be a little more like mercy, a little more like grace, a little more like kindness, goodness, love and faith, a little more like patience, a little more like peace, a little more like Jesus, a little less like me. Yeah, there's no denying I have changed. I've been saved from who I used to be. But even at my best, I must confess, I still need help to see the way you see. Oh, I want to feed the beggar on the street, love to be your hands and feet, freely give what I receive. Lord, help me be. I want to put you first above all else, love my neighbour as myself. In the moments no one sees so, Lord, help me be a little more like mercy, a little more like grace, a little more like kindness, goodness, love and faith, a little more like patience, a little more like peace, a little more like Jesus, a little less like me. Amen.